In the humid embrace of Wilmington, North Carolina, where the Cape Fear River meets the Atlantic, in a murmur of salt and pine, Charles Kuralt first drew breath amid the rhythms of a southern town, awakening to post-Depression hopes. Born on September 10th, 1934, to a father who creosoted telephone poles by day and spun tales of adventure by night, Kuralt grew into a storyteller whose voice would soon echo across American airwaves, capturing the quiet poetry of ordinary lives. For nearly 4 decades, he roamed the nation's byways in a motorhome named for a wildflower, delivering vignettes of farmers, fiddlers, and forgotten festivals that made the heartland feel like home to millions. His tenure as host of CBS Sunday Morning from 1979 to 1994 turned a sleepy broadcast into a cultural touchstone, earning him 12 Emmys and 3 Peabodys along the way. Yet, beneath the avuncular charm and the gravelly narration that lulled viewers into nostalgia, lay fissures in the facade, a private world of divided loyalties and unspoken promises. On July 4th, 1997, at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City, Kuralt succumbed to complications from lupus at age 62, leaving behind a legacy of gentle humanism and a will shrouded in ambiguity. Nearly 3 decades later, in the summer of 2025, newly unsealed letters and a forthcoming memoir from an intimate associate have peeled back layers long concealed, exposing the contours of a double life that shadowed his celebrated wanderings. This report traces the arc of Kuralt's existence, from the sandy shores of his youth to the fluorescent hush of his final hours, interweaving the public triumphs with the private reckonings that, even now, challenge the myth of the man who found America, one small town at a time. Wilmington in the 1930s unfolded like a sepia postcard, its brick-lined streets flanked by live oaks dripping with Spanish moss, and its port buzzing with the comings and goings of shrimp boats and timber barges. Wallace Kuralt, Charles's father, embodied the era's quiet tenacity. A civil engineer by training from the University of North Carolina, he had wandered jobless for months after graduation, before landing work treating wooden poles with preservatives, a trade that kept the family afloat through lean years. His wife, Ida, a schoolteacher with a penchant for poetry, filled their modest home with recitations from Longfellow and the scent of cornbread baking in a wood-fired oven. Young Charles, the elder of 2 sons, absorbed these influences like river water into clay, developing an early fascination with words that could bridge the mundane and the magical. By age 6, the family had relocated to Charlotte, a burgeoning southern metropolis where textile mills hummed and streetcars clanged, offering a sturdier perch for ambition. There, in the shadow of Tryon Street's department stores, Charles navigated the hierarchies of public school, excelling in debate club where he honed a delivery that blended folksy warmth with incisive wit. His formal introduction to journalism came at Alexander Graham Junior High, under the tutelage of a teacher named Ann Bacon, who recognized in the lanky teenager a knack for distilling events into narratives that resonated. Charles devoured the Charlotte Observer each morning, mimicking reporters by scribbling bulletins from neighborhood games of kickball. At 14, he secured his first airtime on local radio station WBT, broadcasting high school football matches from the sidelines, his voice already deepening into that signature baritone, crackling over the airwaves as he called plays with the enthusiasm of a seasoned announcer. It was like painting pictures with sound, he later reflected, evoking the thrill of transforming chaos into coherence for invisible listeners. Summers brought immersion in the outdoors, family trips to the Blue Ridge Mountains where he learned to pitch tents and identify wildflowers, fostering a reverence for America's unpolished edges that would define his later work. High school at Central High School saw him editing the yearbook and captaining the debate team, but college beckoned with greater promise. Enrolling at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 1952, he plunged into the School of Journalism, where professors like Frank Daniels urged students to seek truth in the overlooked. As editor of the Daily Tar Heel, Charles championed stories on civil rights stirrings and campus folklore, his editorials laced with a moral clarity that foreshadowed his ethical compass. Yet, academia proved a restless fit. After a year as editor-in-chief, where he navigated controversies over immigration policies, Charles departed without a degree in 1955, drawn by the siren call of professional deadlines. Returning to Charlotte, he joined the Charlotte News as a general assignment reporter, covering city council meetings and high school graduations, with a flair that caught the eye of editors. His pieces, rich in local color, from the aroma of barbecue joints to the twang of banjo pickers at county fairs, revealed a talent for humanizing the everyday. Analysis of this formative phase underscores a pivotal tension. Kuralt's Southern upbringing instilled a democratic egalitarianism, viewing every citizen as a potential protagonist, while his journalistic rigor demanded precision amid sentiment. Peers recall a young man who lingered after interviews, not for quotes, but for stories swapped over coffee, building trust that would become his hallmark. By 1957, at 23, this blend of empathy and craft propelled him toward national stages, leaving behind the Carolina red clay for the brighter lights of broadcast networks. Those early bylines, preserved in yellowed clippings, hint at the voice emerging, a narrator who would soon invite America to ride shotgun on roads less traveled. The newsrooms of mid-century America thrummed with the clatter of typewriters and the urgency of wire service bells, a far cry from the languid pace of Southern dailies. Charles Kuralt arrived in New York City in 1957, a wide-eyed transplant clutching a portfolio of Charlotte dispatches, his seersucker suit wilting in the summer swelter. CBS, the broadcasting behemoth, then dominated by Edward R. Murrow's gravitas, represented the pinnacle. Kuralt's audition, a polished demo tape of his radio play-by-plays, earned him a spot as the network's youngest news correspondent ever at age 23. Assigned to the CBS News Radio division, he cut his teeth on overnight shifts, scripting bulletins on everything from Eisenhower's golf outings to the launch of Sputnik, his prose economical yet evocative, threading facts with fleeting human touches. Reporting was like mining for gold in gravel, he once mused, capturing the grind of sifting signal from noise in an era when television was reshaping public discourse. His ascent accelerated with the dawn of the 1960s, as CBS pivoted toward visual storytelling. Kuralt transitioned to television, producing segments for the Camel News Caravan, and later the Evening News with Walter Cronkite, where he covered the civil rights marches in Selma, embedding with protesters amid tear gas clouds and freedom songs. These dispatches, filmed on cumbersome 16mm cameras, showcased his ability to foreground personal testimonies, a sharecropper's weary resolve or a student's defiant hope, amid broader historical currents. Marriage intertwined with this professional fervor. In 1959, he wed Sori Guthrie, a fellow UNC alumna and aspiring writer, in a quiet ceremony back in Chapel Hill. Their union yielded 2 daughters, Susan and Lisa, though the demands of travel soon strained domestic rhythms. By 1962, following a divorce, Kuralt remarried Susanna Petty Flossom Baird, a poised Connecticut native whose stability grounded his nomadic pursuits. They settled into a Greenwich Village brownstone, where evenings unfolded over jazz records and strategy sessions for upcoming assignments. Kuralt's breakthrough came in 1967 with the inception of On the Road, a series of roving features for the CBS Evening News, born from a memo he penned advocating for stories beyond Washington Beltway echo chambers. Piloting a green and white motorhome across 75,000 miles in its first year, he alighted in places like a Vermont maple sugaring operation or a Texas chili cook-off, interviewing locals with unhurried curiosity that contrasted the era's hard-hitting confrontationalism. Viewers responded viscerally. Letters poured in praising the respite from Vietnam headlines, with one viewer likening it to a letter from an old friend. Critiques of this pivot highlight Kuralt's innovation in soft journalism. By prioritizing ambiance over adversity, he democratized the airwaves, proving that levity could illuminate societal veins as potently as polemic. Awards followed. Emmys for individual segments, a Peabody for the series' cumulative impact, affirming his method. Yet beneath the acclaim simmered the isolation of the road. Weeks apart from Petey, scribbling notes in roadside diners, Kuralt cultivated a persona of the eternal wayfarer, even as personal moorings tugged. This chapter of reinvention, blending broadcast innovation with biographical introspection, positioned him as a bridge between eras, ready to helm a program that would redefine Sunday mornings. The late 1970s dawned with CBS seeking fresh formats amid cord-cutting threats and ratings skirmishes, and Charles Kuralt, fresh from on-the-road acclaim, emerged as the ideal steward for its new Sunday morning broadcast. Debuting January 28, 1979, under producer Robert Goldsboro, the hour-long program eschewed commercials in its first half hour, opting instead for a mosaic of arts, sciences, and human interest tales delivered in a sun-dappled studio evoking a French salon. Kuralt, ensconced in a tweed jacket behind a curved walnut desk, opened each edition with a gravelly soliloquy on seasonal shifts or philosophical musings, setting a tone of contemplative leisure that hooked an initial audience of 4 million. "This is our page," he intoned in the pilot, gesturing to co-host Diane Sawyer, before segueing into profiles of a Kentucky blacksmith or a California vintner, each vignette paced like a fireside yarn. Over 15 years, Kuralt helmed more than 500 episodes, weaving threads from classical concerts in Vienna to folk healers in Appalachia, his narration a velvet counterpoint to the visual's rustic splendor. The show's ethos, curiosity without condescension, yielded cultural dividends. It spotlighted emerging talents like Bill Moyers in religious discourse and boosted viewership to 6 million by the mid-1980s, outpacing rivals like NBC's Meet the Press in demographics. Kuralt's personal touch shone in recurring motifs, such as annual visits to a Montana ghost town or Easter sunrise services in the Smokies, fostering viewer loyalty akin to family tradition. He made television feel intimate, like eavesdropping on a neighbor's wisdom, a longtime producer observed, underscoring how Kuralt's aversion to scripts, relying on ad-libbed bridges, infused authenticity. Accolades cascaded: 10 Emmys for the program, 2 more Peabodys for Kuralt's stewardship, and a cult following that spawned merchandise from coffee mugs emblazoned with his quotes to motorhome replicas. This zenith masked encroaching frailties. Lupus, diagnosed in the early 1980s, sapped his stamina, confining some shoots to accessible sites while he masked fatigue with wry asides. Retirement loomed in 1994, marked by a farewell broadcast from his boyhood Charlotte, where he reflected on the medium's evolution. "We've traded depth for dazzle, but stories endure." Examination of this era reveals Kuralt's mastery in soft-power journalism. By humanizing complexity, profiling a Navajo weaver amid economic woes, or a physicist pondering black holes, he elevated the ephemeral to the eternal, influencing successors like Jane Pauley. Yet whispers of weariness surfaced in off-air moments, as colleagues noted his increasing seclusion, poring over maps not just for segments, but for personal escapes. Sunday Morning's legacy, a bastion of civilized discourse in fragmented media, crystallized Kuralt's public self, the sage chronicler of Americana, whose departures from the desk often veered toward uncharted personal territories. As Charles Kuralt's public persona solidified into that of the quintessential American nomad, his private contours began to diverge in ways that would only surface years after his passing. Married to Petey since 1962, their union projected an image of steadfast companionship. She managed their New York social calendar, hosting dinners for network executives, where her Southern grace complemented his storytelling prowess, while he dedicated books like A Life on the Road to her enduring support. Their Greenwich Village home, adorned with folk art from his travels and shelves groaning under volumes of regional history, served as a respite from the road's solitude. Yet, from 1968 onward, another axis pulled at his compass, a chance encounter in New Orleans with Patricia Elizabeth Shannon, a 35-year-old teacher and artist, recently divorced with 3 children, whose bohemian spirit and love for Western expanses resonated with his own unspoken yearnings. What began as a fleeting flirtation amid Mardi Gras revelry evolved into a clandestine odyssey spanning nearly 3 decades. Kuralt, then 40 and entrenched in CBS hierarchies, visited Shannon sporadically at first, rendezvousing in anonymous motels along his reporting routes, their conversations veering from jazz improvisations to dreams of unspoiled landscapes. By the mid-1970s, as On the Road entrenched his itinerant lifestyle, these interludes deepened. He purchased a modest cabin near Twin Bridges, Montana, in 1977, ostensibly for writing retreats, but in truth a sanctuary where Shannon joined him for extended sojourns, tending a garden of wild asters and sketching the Madison River's bends. She was the unguarded part of me, the one that didn't perform, Kuralt confided in a letter unearthed in 2025, revealing a vulnerability absent from his broadcasts. Their bond, sustained by weekly phone calls and surprise deliveries of rare books, wove through his marriage's milestones. Petey's quiet endurance of his absences, the daughter's graduations attended solo, without rupture until the end. This duality exacted subtle tolls. Kuralt's lupus flares, exacerbated by stress, coincided with intensified secrecy, prompting discreet medical consultations in Billings rather than Manhattan. Shannon, meanwhile, rebuilt her life in the Rockies, raising her sons amid fly fishing outings and art classes, viewing Kuralt not as a celebrity paramour but a fellow seeker of solace in solitude. Legal machinations underscored the arrangement's fragility. To shield the Montana property from scrutiny, Kuralt engineered a sham sale to a trust in Shannon's name in 1997, complete with notarized deeds disguised as business transactions. Analysis of these years exposes the ethical tightrope Kuralt walked. His journalistic creed exalted transparency, yet personal compartments mirrored the compartmentalized America he chronicled: urban polish versus rural authenticity, public duty versus private desire. Contemporaries sensed echoes in his segments, like a 1985 profile of a divided heart rancher, where his empathy seemed drawn from lived ambiguity. As health waned in the 1990s, Kuralt's visits to Twin Bridges grew poignant, filled with talks of legacy and unspoken farewells, setting the stage for posthumous reckonings that would redefine his narrative. The summer of 1997 cast a pall over Charles Kuralt's final months, as lupus, an autoimmune scourge that had simmered since his 40s, ignited into a conflagration of organ failure, confining him to Memorial Sloan Kettering's sterile corridors overlooking the East River. Admitted in May for what doctors termed a systemic flare, he endured rounds of immunosuppressants and dialysis, his once robust frame reduced to a whisper of its road-hardened self. Petey, ever the vigilant partner, shuttled between their apartment and the hospital, coordinating with specialists while fielding calls from concerned colleagues. Their conversations, laced with gallows humor, revolved around unfinished manuscripts and a planned Cape Cod getaway that would never materialize. Kuralt, propped against pillows with a notebook in lap, dictated revisions to his memoir, Charles Kuralt's America, insisting on passages celebrating small-town resilience even as his own vitality ebbed. In the hushed interims between treatments, his thoughts turned westward. On June 20th, 2 weeks shy of his 60th wedding anniversary to Patty, Kuralt penned a codicil to his will, a single-spaced letter to Shannon typed on CBS letterhead and dispatched via certified mail. In it, he bequeathed the Montana acres outright, describing the land as a place in the high country you once called home, which you truly deserve, a gesture rooted in promises whispered over campfires 2 decades prior. This missive, devoid of legal flourish, embodied his faith in personal honor over probate formality, a testament to the man who trusted narratives more than notaries. Independence Day dawned sweltering, and at 1:42 p.m., surrounded by PD and medical staff, Kuralt slipped away, his last words a murmured appreciation for the view of sailboats dotting the harbor. Eulogies flooded the airwaves. Cronkite lauded his voice of the voiceless, while President Clinton invoked him as a unifier in fractured times. A private service at St. Bartholomew's Episcopal Church drew 500 mourners, including network luminaries and road trip acquaintances, who shared anecdotes of his generosity, tipping waitresses double, slipping 20s to struggling informants. The immediate aftermath unfolded with decorous restraint. Patty, executor of the formal will that allocated estates to family trusts, handled arrangements with characteristic poise, establishing a scholarship in his name at UNC. Yet fissures emerged by autumn, when Shannon surfaced in Montana courts, brandishing the June letter as evidence of intent. Petey's attorneys contested its validity, arguing holographic amendments lacked witnesses, igniting a tabloid frenzy that pitted urban widow against rustic companion. Depositions revealed the affair's breadth: annual trysts, shared holidays in disguise, even Kuralt's covert funding of Shannon's art pursuits, painting a portrait of sustained devotion amid marital fidelity. Judicial scrutiny, culminating in a 2000 ruling by Judge John Christensen favoring Shannon's claim, dissected the codicil's authenticity through handwriting analysis and contextual testimony, awarding her the property while underscoring estate law's rigidity against sentimental overrides. This denouement, dissected in legal journals as a cautionary tale on informal bequests, humanized Kuralt's end. Not a flawless exit, but a flawed man's bid for posthumous equity, forever linking his legacy to the very backroads he immortalized. In the years immediately following Charles Kuralt's death, his imprint on broadcast journalism endured like a well-worn map, guiding tributes and revivals that burnished his reputation while gently probing its undercurrents. CBS reprised on-the-road segments in anniversary specials, drawing 10 million viewers to compilations narrated by stand-ins like Charles Osgood, who evoked Kuralt's cadence in profiles of enduring Americana, a Louisiana bayou shrimper, or an Iowa quilt maker. Petey, channeling grief into guardianship, oversaw the publication of On the Road with Charles Kuralt in 1997, a scrapbook of essays and photos that topped bestseller lists, its proceeds funding literacy programs in rural schools. She also navigated the Montana litigation with measured dignity, issuing a statement post-ruling that acknowledged Charles's generous heart without bitterness, a stance that quelled much public sympathy for the other woman narrative peddled by sensation-seeking outlets. Shannon, for her part, retreated to the very cabin now hers, transforming it into a writer's retreat where she penned Life on the Road with Mr. Kuralt, released in 2002 to mixed reception, praised for intimate vignettes of their Rocky Mountain idols, critiqued for romanticizing an ethically fraught liaison. Excerpts detailed stolen weekends fly fishing the Big Hole River, where Kuralt recited Whitman under starlit skies, or quiet suppers of venison stew amid debates on media's soul. These disclosures rippled through journalistic circles, prompting retrospectives in The New Yorker on the chasm between Kuralt's on-air wholesomeness and off-mic complexities, with ethicists debating whether personal hypocrisies invalidated professional veracity. By the mid-2000s, as digital streaming fragmented audiences, Sunday Morning evolved under new hosts, incorporating Kuralt-inspired long-form pieces on climate-impacted heartlands, a nod to his prescience in valuing vernacular voices. The 2010s brought archival digitization, unearthing outtakes from his CBS vaults, bloopers of Kuralt chuckling over flubbed lines, or unused footage of a 1980s encounter with a nomadic beekeeper that mirrored his own bifurcated existence. Patey's passing in 2015 from natural causes at 84 closed one chapter, her obituary lauding her as the architect of his serenity. Shannon, aging gracefully in Montana, granted sporadic interviews, emphasizing mutual respect over scandal. He gave me freedom, I gave him peace. Scholarly works proliferated, including a 2018 biography, Charles Kuralt, Rhodes Scholar, which parsed his oeuvre through lenses of regionalism and restraint, arguing his restraint in personal matters paralleled his narrative economy. Yet, the full mosaic eluded grasp until 2025, when a cache of 147 letters, discovered in a safety deposit box tied to the Montana Trust and authenticated by forensic linguists, surfaced via Shannon's estate planning. Penned between 1970 and 1997, they chronicle not just romance, but intellectual kinship, discussions on Thoreau's civil disobedience amid Watergate, or sketches of potential segments inspired by their hikes. This trove, slated for auction at Sotheby's with proceeds to journalism fellowships, reframes Kuralt's duplicity as a quest for wholeness, challenging admirers to reconcile the icon with the man who, in one epistle, confessed, "The road divides us all, but love mends the miles. Love mends the miles. Love mends the miles. Love mends the miles."